South Carolina College had 143 students in the year 1861 when Fort Sumter was fired upon. It was later said that the entire student body of the college rose as one man and joined the Confederate armies. Well, this is not exactly true. In fact, one alumnus even fought for the Union side. His father had been a professor here, and his own dear brother had fought with Wade Hampton and was killed in Virginia, and yet this boy fought for the Yankees. And that benighted soul's name was Guido Norman Lieber. He is not the person this building is named after. Lieber College is named for his father, Francis Lieber, who was a very great teacher and scholar. Soon enough, though, after the outbreak of the war, all the college buildings were used as a hospital for the wounded, both rebel and Yankee alike. Because of that, when General William Tecumseh Sherman marched his troops through Columbia, carrying with him a hailstorm of burning fire, April 14th, 1865, the college was saved. The building was home at that time to Joseph LeConte, a chemistry professor. His daughter Emma could see much of the city from her third-story window, and she wrote about it in her diary.
Well, at about 7 o'clock, I was on the back porch in the third story. Before me, the southern horizon was lit by campfires which dotted the woods. On one side, the sky was illuminated by the burning of General Hampton's residence, a few miles off the country. I went downstairs in time to hear a neighbor say there was a fire on Main Street. Sumter Street was brightly lighted by a burning house so near our back porch we could feel the heat. By its red glare, we could see the Yankee soldiers walking, well, generally staggering, back and forth from camp to the town. They were shouting, hurrahing, cursing South Carolina, swearing, singing ribald songs and using such obscene language that we were forced to go indoors. The fire on Main Street was now raging, and we anxiously watched its progress from the upper front windows. In a little while, the flames broke forth in every direction. By midnight, the whole town was wrapped in one huge blaze. Still, the flames did not approach sufficiently to threaten our immediate safety. I fell into a heavy sort of stupor from which I was roused by the sound of weeping. Mrs. Caldwell's house was ablaze, and my Aunt Josie's too. They huddled at the front door. It was quite a scene. It was now about 4 in the morning, and the State House was one grand conflagration. The college buildings caught fire on the other side of the Horseshoe. Some Yankee soldiers joined the doctors and the nurses who were tended to the wounded housed on campus, and they saved the buildings. Poor patients had to fend for themselves. Those that could crawled out onto the grass in front of the buildings because they were sure the buildings would burn. Those that could not move, they cried piteously and waited to be burned to death. The vacant lot across Sumter Street was crowded with homeless women and children. A few were wrapped in blankets, but most of them were shivering in the night air. Night turned into noonday, but only with a blazing, scorching flare that was horrible. There was a copper-colored sky with columns of black rolling smoke. They were littered with sparks and flying embers. All around us were falling thick showers of burning flakes. Streets, as far as the eye could see, were solid masses of flames. The air was filled with this horrible roar of the flames. On every side was heard the crackling of fire, the crashing of timber, the thunder of falling buildings. It was a horrible 12 hours. The memory of it will haunt me as long as I shall live. It seemed as if the day would never come. The sun rose finally, dim and red through the thick, murky atmosphere. It had set the night before on a beautiful town full of women and children, but it shone dully down this morning on smoking ruins and abject misery.
The Union soldiers took over many of the buildings for their use. The college trustees couldn't very well ask them to leave, but they did demand payment of rent. Thank you.
I was looking at my garnet in black last night, thinking about school days at Carolina. AB, class of 1937. I came across this old chestnut. Young man says, "Have you an opening for a bright, intelligent college graduate?" And the employer says, "Yes, don't slam it on your way out." Well, it was the Depression. Before I came down to Carolina, class of 37, my father told me that someday I'd look back on my days in college as the best days of my life. In 1933, I didn't believe it. The 30s were tough times for Carolina. Tuition went up. Professor salaries went down. But all in all, the number of students didn't go down by much. Over 1,400 of us. Eventually, Roosevelt's work programs began to make a difference. The Civic Work Administration paid for the repair of LeConte, Davis, Sloan, and Rutledge here, which needed some work. Rutledge had been the first building of the old South Carolina College that was completed in 1805, I think. A fire all but destroyed it in 1855, but it was rebuilt. By 1934, it needed some work. People needed jobs. Federal work programs also paid for the new library at the head of the Horseshoe. Later, it was named the McKissick Library. It's quite a grand building from the outside, the McKissick Library. And after studying in the old library, the one that's become known as the Caroliniana, McKissick just never seemed quite right inside. I was lucky. I was one of 125 boys to get a work scholarship from the Federal Emergency Relief Administration. $150 a year? Oh, a lot of money then. Although I couldn't always find a dime for a pack of cigarettes. Other boys had newspaper routes. Some would work the night shift in a cotton mill. Still others wandered at night from room to room in the tenements. That's what the college dorms were called. Trying to sell candy or peanuts. I'd sell my ticket to a football game, and then get a job patrolling the fences of Melton Field during the game. The ticket and pay for the patrol usually netted me $3. Oh, that was enough spending money for a couple of weeks. We had simple amusements. There weren't many co-eds at Carolina then. Underclass women weren't allowed to live on campus, and tuition was extra for females. Never could figure out why. But we had dances, as lavish as festooned crepe paper, the music of local bands, homemade evening dresses, and ill-fitting borrowed tuxedos could make them. There wasn't any parking problem on campus. Few students could afford cars. City girls, with the use of their father's cars, could find dates readily. What few rattletrap jalopies we could afford, well, they were always full. 3, 4 on each seat, and others hanging off the fenders of the running boards. Now, I guess my father was right. I miss my days as a freshman rat at Carolina. Out of car. I'd walk uptown with my girl to the movie houses on Main Street. Go bowling. Share a milkshake at Burnett's drugstore. Listen to someone play the piano in the women's building lounge. Or, on the sweetest of nights of early spring, just sit, talk, hold hands on the benches ringing the Horseshoe. Somehow I managed to escape Columbia without getting married. Which reminds me of another corker from the yearbook. 2 girls talking. Hey, one says, "Hasn't John ever married?" And the second replies, "No, and I don't think he intends to, because he's studying for a bachelor's degree." Well, thanks for listening. There's a multi-image presentation at the McKissick patio, and other friends of mine are waiting to tell you about other periods at Carolina. Thank you very much.
Welcome, folks, to South Caroliniana Library. Isn't this a fine-looking building? You know, when it was first completed in 1840, it was the first freestanding building in America that had been erected specifically to be a library. Now, that's a pretty big claim to fame, but it's not its only one. See, it's thought that the famous architect Robert Mills designed this building, because the facade up front here looks just like the facade of the fireproof building in Charleston. And as everyone knows, Robert Mills designed the fireproof building. See, the inside up here, second floor reading room, is designed to be an exact replica of the Library of Congress reading room. And all that inside has remained unchanged since about 1840. And it is the only building on the Horseshoe that you can say that about. See, one of the reasons I think it stayed unchanged for so long is because they didn't allow artificial lighting of any kind inside the library until the turn of the century. See, there'd be less risk of fire that way. Now, I was a student here myself in the 1890s, and maybe if I'd spent a little bit more time up there, I'd have been a better student. But not me. I wanted nothing better than to be outdoors, you know, batting around a ball with some fellows. See, sports of all kinds were just getting going around now. Oh, and not just at Carolina. A lot of time had passed since President White of Cornell University made his famous quip. And now, you probably haven't heard it, but it was real famous then. See, the Cornell University football team had been invited to compete against the University of Michigan. Well, President White didn't take too kindly to that. He said, "I will not permit 30 men to travel 400 miles merely to agitate a bag of wind." Now, football. Christmas Eve, 1892. A bunch of Carolina boys went down to Charleston to play Furman in an unauthorized game. Furman won, 44-0. But see, that just got Carolina all fired up, because 2 years after that, we were playing regularly scheduled games. And 2 years after that, we had a coach. That was 1896, and that was the first year that Carolina played Clemson. And it was November 13th, and the state fair was in town. And the game was played on the fairgrounds. Now, it started at 11 a.m. Early morning game, I know, but see, that was so people could watch the horse races after, and so they could drive their wagons home before dark. Now, 2,000 people paid 25 cents each to watch that first game. And then it rained on top of that. But you know, it said rain doesn't stop a football game, it just makes it a lot more amusing. Well, back then, see, the Clemson boys were, well, they were bigger, and they were better trained. But Carolina won the first Carolina-Clemson game, 12-6. Oh, they kept on playing even if we lost. I love sports. Played baseball, too. See, intercollegiate competition just began in 1895, but Carolina wasn't faring as well then. In fact, our number one visiting team wiped us out because their guys could do something our guys had never seen before. He could throw a curveball. See, that was new then. And so was lawn tennis. Tennis had just gotten down to the state around that time, and it was the kind of nice, polite game that one went out and played with a young lady. And none of you young ladies that are right here would have been a student at this university until 1895. See, that was the first year women were admitted. And at first, the guys, well, we didn't like that too much at first. Now, I can't remember why, but it seems like the ideas about men and women and modesty were just a lot more complex then. In fact, that reminds me of a story that illustrates that point that occurred right up here in this library. You see, you have to get the picture first. In the 1880s, Carolina, the social life was glistening. The 1885 commencement ball was held in the State House grounds. Supper was in the Senate chambers, and there was dancing all over the grounds until after dawn. So Carolina returned the favor. They had a party here where they hung Japanese lanterns around the whole width of this campus, which is, you know, pretty much what you see around you right now. That's all it was then. It was called a fête champêtre, which, pardon my French, didn't take it in college, but see, that was just called a fancy word for a country party. You have to understand that it was in this time of elegance and sophistication and downright party spirit that a very, very, very nice reception was held up here in this library. And the president's house had sent over a bunch of people to clean and make the place presentable and nice for this reception. Well, one of the maids was scurrying back over to the house to speak to Mrs. McBride, very, very upset. And she wanted an apron. So McBride was sort of confused and said, Susan, you already have an apron. You're wearing one. Why do you want another apron? Well, it seems that the maid had been dusting away in the library. She's dusting away and had come across a very nice classical statue. A nude classical statue of the goddess Aphrodite. Nude. Everything showing. What she thought that was indecent. It just wasn't decent for any sort of company to see. So she rushed back over to the house and told Miss McBride that she needed an apron on that statue to cover up all those parts. Well, Miss McBride thought that was pretty funny. The idea of a very elegant reception, there's an apron on a classical statue. She had a big laugh about that. But she also had the statue safely hidden away before the reception occurred. That's how modest things were in Carolina in the 1890s.
Doff your gowns, good fellows, don't put your coats on slow, for drinking at Old Billy's we are ready for to go.
Above he gives good suppers,
good dinners down below, and many a time we've had a good spree at Billy Mabin's.
Here at the South Carolina College in the late 50s, we kind of...
The 1850s.
Of course, the 1850s. Discipline is strict here at the college. Mandatory morning chapel, in your rooms by 9 p.m., and dinner at the Commons.
Oh, but that's been done away with. Well, that is, the steward still serves at the Commons, but you don't have to eat there if you can find board in town. Not since the Great Biscuit Rebellion. Well, students always complained about the food at the Commons. But in 1852, it is said the steward served wormy biscuits. The students demanded leave to dine in town. The trustees refused, so 108 students left the campus in protest. The Biscuit Rebellion.
And one April Fool's Day, someone, I don't know who, made off with the school bell. Well, how could a student know when to show up at class without a bell to remind him? And then last Saturday, some hooligans made off with the steps leading up to the chapel.
But what good did that do? The faculty just laid a plank up to the door and waddled up. Well, I remember when President Henry announced in chapel that there were too many dogs on campus and that they should be expelled. The next morning, he noticed several dogs suspended from one of the horse racks. The dogs yapped to be let loose.
When President Henry asked what that was all about, we said we softened his order from expulsion to suspension.
But we would not have you believe the students of this college are without honor. We do not lie, steal, or cheat. We protect the proprieties, the honor of women, even to fighting a duel if necessary.
Yeah, but dueling can be an awful thing. Some years ago, in 1833, there was a duel between Govan Roach of Colleton County and James G. Adams of Richland County. Now, you see, Roach was a young man. He was about 6 feet tall, and he was very handsome. And Adams was not so tall, but he was still admired by the young ladies of Columbia. One evening, the two left their rooms here at Saussure to have supper at the steward's hall. When the dinner bell rang and the doors on either end of the room opened, Roach and Adams led the charge to the supper table.
There was a mad dash to get to the table first and lay claim to a serving dish. Well, it was considered a matter of honor that when one man touched a plate, that it was his, and he got choice from it first. Roach and Adams ended up opposite each other, and each touched a dish of trout at exactly the same time.
Adams did not let go.
Neither did Roach. After a few moments, Roach growled at Adams, "Sir, I will see you after supper."
There were no harsh words, no fisticuffs. Both were cool as cucumbers. They just glared at each other through the meal like two angry young bulls.
Roach had choice of weapons, pistols at 10 paces.
A crowd assembled. The two young fellows stood back to back. They marched off 10 paces. They turned, and on the count of one, they raised their weapons. Roach's pistol caught in the flap of his frock coat.
Seeing this, Adams lowered his weapon to the ground. The call was given a second time. Gentlemen, are you ready? Fire one! Both men were badly wounded. Within several hours, Adams died.
Roach recovered, it's true, but he died while still a young man. He never seemed to get over having killed his best friend over a point of honor.
Over a plate of trout.
Ah, but that was long ago. Today, in 1859, we're far too civilized for such behavior. By lamplight, we read our Latin and Greek. We pore over philosophy and mathematics.
And at commencement, we're going to have a medieval jousting tournament. Which man amongst us who can spear 3 rings on a lance by horseback shall have the honor of selecting the May Queen? And when we graduate and he's just taken his degree, we'll drink, we'll ne'er disgrace the title of A.B. And when we've left Columbia while wending homeward slow, we'll sigh o'er reminiscences that Billy Mabin's old.
Well, thank you for listening to our side of things. Now, if you like, you might take a trip down to South Carolina Library. We have a friend down there who can tell you about the 1890s and sports and such in that era. And if you're interested in the Civil War, you might go on over to Lieber College and find out all about that. Thank you.
Welcome. Welcome, everyone. Why, I never dreamed that so many of you would be here today. You know, this crowd may be bigger than the whole city of Columbia back in 1833 when I was a student. Oh, but first, let me tell you that my name is Thomas Bull, and I'm from Beaufort. I've been invited here to talk about life at South Carolina College and Columbia. It's not an easy assignment because there's a lot to tell. Even though there were less than 100 men on the campus of South Carolina College when I started in 1833, we were close. Good South Carolina boys who wanted the right education. Thomas Cooper was president, and a good one at that. He looked so much like a turtle, lots of us called him Old Coot. But that wasn't all he was called. He was tough and demanded the best. He once told the Board of Trustees, "I have no hesitation in saying that the education received in the college is not exceeded in the United States." He believed in the classics, and even though I had my heart set on growing rice and cotton, I learned Cicero and Homer and was required to recite Greek and Latin at least twice a week. But that's okay. The ladies found it charming. Oh, but you know most of that, and even about the duel between 2 students that took place while I was there. Both of those good men died over a point of honor, arguing over who had first rights to a serving plate of fish at dinner. Oh, you want to know about Columbia? It only had about 200 houses back in '33, maybe a dozen shops, but it was an entertaining town. Not that the city people always loved the students, especially when we got to tying lighted fireballs to the tails of animals and chasing them across campus. Still, they gave some wonderful balls. I remember especially the Lafayette Ball. There were horse races, beautiful girls, and everyone tried out the new split spoons we now call forks. Frankly, I was surprised they caught on. Still think it's easier to eat peas with a knife. Well, I must run. A lot's happened in 200 years.
It's hard to believe this is the same place. Before I begin, please allow me to pause a moment. I'm William Campbell Preston and was president from 1845 to 1851. I understand there's even a building around here somewhere named for me. I guess what amazes me most is that though a lot has changed, many of the same issues linger. When I was on campus, parking was a problem. Students didn't like the food, resulting in what was later called the Great Biscuit Rebellion. And the state legislature was in arms over South Carolina College being a rich man's school and a center for dead languages. Still, President James Thornwell, who followed me, announced the school was in business to produce scholars and not sappers or miners, apothecaries, doctors, or farmers. Those boys at the State House do love to get their dander up. Enrollment increased to 247 while I was president. Greek fraternities were organized, and the first out-of-state student was admitted. And Thomas Neal of the college began offering his services in Columbia to parents who were desirous of having their children lend a charm to the fireplace. Also, homes for both the Clariosophics and the Euphrateans were built on opposite sides of the Horseshoe. And we began enjoying the use of a modern college library building. In 1850, it contained more than 18,000 volumes and was larger than the library at Princeton. We even completed work on what was later called Longstreet Theater, although I must admit I was not sure it would ever get finished. It ran more than 2 years behind schedule. The contractor went bankrupt. When it was finished, the acoustics were so poor, we had to abandon it as an auditorium. But a lot was underway then. Work had just begun on the new north wing of the State House. The old courthouse was torn down and city taxes were raised. Taxes were $1 on $100 of property valuation. And for the first time, levies were placed on dogs, insurance policies, and incomes. But that was about all the building that could be done before the war between the states took everyone's attention. They say that I was at South Carolina during the Golden Age, but the times that followed me were sad and long and hard. It's a wonder the school ever survived at all. The secession convention was held in December 1860. Fort Sumter was bombarded in April of the next year. And soon, most of the students were enlisting. Campus buildings were turned over to Confederate authorities for use as hospital facilities. These buildings were saved when Sherman stormed Columbia only because they contained Confederate and Union wounded. But that's another story.
Hello. I normally don't talk with my mouth. I usually do my talking with my ball and glove. I'm a shortstop. Came to South Carolina College in 1906 from Union to get an education and play baseball. It sure is nice that girls study here now. The stuck-ups over at the Clariosophic Society still say it's not a woman's place to think. But I think it's great they're here to look at. The Greeks are banned now because of the way they treated the barbarians, the guys who weren't Greeks, so they can't meet anymore. But we do have sports. Baseball is the best, of course, but we also got track, football, golf, and tennis. Of course, we can't play football at Clemson anymore because of that big fight after we whooped them a few years back. We still got the Rats, though. It's great fun to make the freshmen get down on their knees and push a little ball with their nose. And every time they come to a crack, they gotta act like they're blowing a whistle. What do you want, we say. And they say, water or wood. We always keep big buckets of water and hard paddles around for times like that. But that makes for a good school. 700 students who know each other. When I started, we were a college. Now we're a university. I guess that means I'm getting a better education. Ben Tillman still tells everybody that the college is the seedbed of aristocracy. but I'm living proof that ain't so. I'm not a member of the afternoon music club, don't go to town theater, or do any of that elite stuff. Although I would have loved to have gone to the state ball in the hall of the House of Representatives. I don't care much about dancing, but dinner included 6 courses. Well, gotta go.
Hi there. I have no special skill or reason to be here other than the fact that I've hung around for a long time. I went to Carolina in the 30s and had a daughter in school in the 50s, and now I've got grandchildren who started a few years ago and act like they don't want to ever get out. This school and this town have gone through a lot of changes in that time, and a few things have remained the same. The grandkids still complain about the food. Professors insist they shouldn't have to teach so many hours, and finding a parking place requires an act of the legislature. It's hard to believe that 26,000 people now populate this little piece of earth. When I started during the Depression, the enrollment was 1,800, and the cost of the first year at the university reached the astronomical sum of $305. That included all expenses. William Melton, who was president in the 1920s, wanted the school to become a force in the state. I grow weary of the expression so often on the lips of men who call themselves educators, he said, that too many men and women go to college. I believe in South Carolina we have demonstrated that too few of our citizens have been given the advantage of a college education. But what I remember best is the years under J. Ryan McKissick. An extensive building program was undertaken, the doctoral program was reinstated, and the university press founded. This type of momentum continued to grow in the 1940s and 1950s while the bad feelings in town began to fade. More and more, Columbia and Carolina became a part of one another until they reached a point that both realized they couldn't do without the other. Not that the townspeople have forgotten about the students who shaved the tails off their horses, danced to jazz, or tried to jam themselves into a phone booth. My daughter was on hand for that Sigma Chi effort in 1959, I must admit. But Columbia and Carolina were maturing and seeing that only a bright future lay ahead. Although 500 streakers showing their best down Green Street in 1974 will probably not be recorded as the school's greatest moment. Under President Thomas F. Jones, who was here from 1962 to 1974, 29 new buildings were added, including Carolina Coliseum, the Law Center, the Physical Sciences Center, and the College of Business Administration. Enrollment went from 8,000 to more than 23,000. It was also during this time that blacks were admitted for the first time since Reconstruction. Although there were only a few hundred black students on campus by the early 1970s, the attitude of the university played a major role in the successful integration of normal Columbia life. Today, with Columbia's 200th anniversary celebration all around us, the capital city and the university are standing on the brink of their proudest moments. There is a momentum and vitality in the air that signals excellence. The leadership of President Jim Holderman has created the environment for success. Everyone is eager for the Koger Center to bring new cultural opportunities to the city. An expanded engineering facility is about to be launched, and Columbia is moving to use its natural assets, like the riverfront, to its best advantage for the benefit of all. Like I said, I'm not here for any special reason, but it's great to salute a city and university on the move, moving forward together toward excellence. Now, if they could only solve the parking problem.